Having completed the front gearbox in the previous kit bag, it's time to move our attention to the rear gearbox with bag E. The rear gearbox pretty much follows the same basic principle as the front, so again you'll need to keep the thread lock and black grease handy for this kit bag, so with that let's crack on. As with the front gearbox, we begin with the main gearbox housing and inserting a bearing to the outside and another on the inside, both again being the same size, before pushing the pinion gear through from inside out, and placing a small shim on the outer side. The rear universal drive shaft here, complete with coupler attached, can now seat over the pinion body, lining the set screw up with the flat portion of the pinion gear, and locking into place using the set screw with a little thread lock thrown in, of course, making sure it's nice and tight. Give the coupler a few turns, making sure everything is nice and free. Now insert the rear differential, constructed in bag B, into position. With it in place, check the fitment, making sure it's nice and snug, adding the larger shims if needed. We can then place the gearbox cover on top and secure into place using 2 of the 14mm cap-head screws supplied within the package. We're screwing into plastic here, so tighten enough so that it's snug, but don't over tighten as you'll risk stripping the threads. At this point, just like we did with the front gearbox, coat the ring gear with a small amount of grease going all the way round. Again, you don't need to go crazy with the grease here. After which we can slowly turn the universal drive shaft as well as the differential itself, just to get some of that grease spread around the ring gear and pinion, and to check everything is turning nice and freely. We can then proceed to seal up the gearbox by placing the final plastic cover on the bottom and securing into place using 2 6mm flathead screws, again taking care not to over tighten and strip any threads. Gearbox now sealed, although still open from the bottom, so take care with that grease. This will be covered when installed on the chassis later. We now need to grab our rear shock tower. Just like the front, it's carrying a lot of customizability with regard to mounting positions, allowing you to really tweak your driving style. We'll continue to stick to stock positions for the initial build though, so we'll start with the shock standoffs, inserting a 10mm button-head screw, complete with thread lock into the middle position, and tighten into a shock standoff while holding with the Tekno wrench. Complete the same on the opposite side. Next, we'll get the rear body mount into position, so line this up on the opposite side of the standoffs we just installed, in the center here, and secure with 2 14mm cap-head screws, again going into plastic so a nice snug fit is all that's needed. With that done, we can get the rear wing mount secured to the tower. Again, we have some customizability with the 2 positions available, the stock position being the higher of the 2 options. So with the wing mount lined up, feed through the first 14mm cap-head screw and secure to an M3 lock nut on the opposite side. There are another 3 screws that need to be inserted here, all securing to the M3 lock nuts. After which the rear wing mount is securely attached. And with that, we're pretty much done with the rear shock tower, and it can now be installed onto the rear gearbox. So with the shock tower lined up into position, use the 4 remaining 14mm cap-head screws to secure the tower into place. Again, we're going into plastic, so be firm but do not over tighten. If you decide to use an electric driver instead, then go slow and stop towards the end in order to use a hand driver for the last tightening up. Otherwise, you risk stripping threads. And with that said, our rear gearbox is complete, along with the rear shock tower. Again, everything fits together with perfection, making for a nice tunable setup. So at this stage, we have our front and rear gearboxes now complete, as well as the center differential already on the main chassis. So it's time to move on to bag F, where we'll continue with the rear end assembly.